Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's webcast, we're talking about a real hot button issue, generative AI and trust. Does artificial intelligence have our trust? Should it have our trust? That's a real issue. What does it all mean for business? To discuss that, I'm joined by a major industry thought leader. With me is Nabil Bukhari, Chief Technology and Product Officer at Extreme Networks. Nabil, absolutely thrilled to have you with us today.
James, it's always good to be here. Always good to talk to you, and you're spot on. That is the topic these days.
That is a hot topic these days.
Yeah.
All right, you said some things, and I will quote you. You've said there's a lack of trust around generative AI. That technology executives are forgetting in the rush to adopt AI the fundamentals of our human society and culture. If AI doesn't have our trust, it's dead in the water. Now, I agree with all that personally, but what is your thought? What's the issue here?
Yeah, James, I did say that. So that's the
It's a
thing.
lot to say, and some executives don't want to say that because they want
Yeah.
to sort of put that under the carpet, like what AI not trustable? We're trying to sell AI, so
Yeah.
I applaud you for saying it.
Right. And James, so let's unpack that a little bit because there's a lot more to it in there, which let's start by talking about what do we mean by trust in a work environment, right?
Right.
Because on a personal level, um, on a side note, let me just say this part and then we'll come back to trust.
Sure.
I speak about AI all the time, and what recently I was speaking somewhere and a person in the audience asked me, I said, like, well, why is AI different? Right. And it really got me thinking. And surprisingly, the answer was not it that came up in my head that, oh, this is the fastest growing technology or is like amazing and stuff. Because there's a lot of other really amazing tech that is out there, and some of it is growing really, really fast.
Sure.
But the unique thing about AI is that this is one of those, perhaps the first tech that the audiences, the end user got to know about it and got exposed to it way before the companies could do anything with it. And
Hmm.
that's the whole chat GPT exposure, like,
Right.
100 people in the first month and nobody in the enterprise had any thoughts around it.
Right.
And that set the pace and the expectation to it. So I always find that that's like a really something very unique about AI.
Well,
But
I agree. One small point, I agree with you in that it's kind of confusing in that there was enterprise AI for years before ChatGPT. Companies were pouring money into it and maybe not getting that much results.
yeah,
And then GPT, debuted in November 2022,
right.
and it was a consumer technology. So it's a funny thing about this technology. It is a consumer and an enterprise technology. Where, say, for example, a cloud, like private cloud and hybrid cloud, that's not really a consumer technology, but AI is both a consumer and an enterprise technology.
100%. And it's a tech that got exposed to the users first before anybody. And this now leads into the topic that we were talking about the trust,
Mhm.
is that it has created this dichotomy of expectations from the users because they can sit in their private offices and they can open up any of the chatbots. There's so many of them available, and they can ask them to design their travel or
Sure.
find them recommendation, write them an essay or whatever have you. And they're using it on a day-to-day basis. And then they come to the work environment and they expect that their work environment would have the same level of AI.
Right.
But the trick is that people inherently trust that the enterprise technologies would be more secure, would inherently be compliant with your company's, policies, would be compliant so they don't have to think about it, would be accurate. There is
Hmm.
so much data on the expectation of accuracy between a consumer technology and an enterprise technology, right? So
Hmm.
these are 4 or 5 things that kind of come together, and now the users just expect that when they log into their company's AI, it will inherently have all of these things.
Hmm.
But they want the company's AI to do more things than what the consumer one can do. And this is the dichotomy that is happening out there. And it is forcing companies to actually adopt AI faster than they are actually capable of doing. And
Well,
that's really where I was coming from, that there is a certain expectation of trust that includes accuracy, compliance, guardrails, everything that is inherent in the people. And right now on the enterprise side, I would tell you from my experience, 9 out of 10 enterprises will not be able to deliver that. And then what will happen is that users will lose that trust. So that was the background of that comment. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense, and I could see someone going into work and they log into their chat bot and think it's going to be at a higher level, more secure. But of course, from their view, but even the company's view, it's actually less secure because if I enter my grocery budget every week into my personal GPT, it's no big deal. But
Yeah.
suddenly, if I'm in the enterprise setting and I enter my division's budget into GPT, that's proprietary information. That's really a problem. So even, I think the company may be more worried than the staffers are worried. Like, how are our staffers using this? We're nervous about, what the repercussions are.
100%. And if you remember early days of ChatGPT, there were like multiple different news items out there that, oh, such and such company, their IP got exposed through ChatGPT
Right.
and like multiple different variations
Yep.
on that theme. And now we're like 3 years down the road, but still what we're seeing is that there is this rush to push out an AI strategy by every company out there. And quite
Uh,
frankly, people like myself and people sitting in the boards, they are the worst, offenders in that. Because no matter which executive I talk to, the story goes something like this, like, oh, we walked into our board meeting and the board said, we must have an AI strategy.
right.
And you can replace the board with a CEO or a CXO or whatever the case might be.
Hmm.
The reality is, James, that the best way to talk about AI is to not talk about AI,
Hmm.
right? When was the last time we got up and we said, like, hey, I really want to build a lot of buildings, so I must have a concrete strategy. Like, how am I going to mix concrete, right? We
Right.
don't do things like that. Or,
Yeah.
I really want to create a data center, so I'm really going to start with the fossil fuel strategy, right? So
Sure.
this is that it's kind of upside down. So then you could ask, like, okay, so where should we start from? And this is something that we talk about quite a bit, is that, look, AI at the minimum is an accelerator, and on the higher end, it is something magical. So
Right.
it goes between an accelerator to being completely magical. But the thing is that it doesn't do anything on its own. What you want it to do must come from you. So what
Hmm.
are you going to do with the AI, right? So right now, if you think about most of the companies, they say, okay, let's start with a chatbot. Chatbots are already commoditized, right? And most of them actually do a lot more damage than benefit.
Hmm.
Um, but the reality is, what are the experiences that you want to enable? And I like to talk about it in an ARC framework, and stay with me for a few minutes. I'm
Please.
throwing another acronym in there,
Okay, good. No, I love
because
acronyms. Yeah.
because we are tech people, right? So the ARC, really ARC. So look at you as at a company, right? As a leader, if I am said like, hey, I want to do something with AI, I should look at the experiences of my people, my customer, my users, whoever, and I should segregate them out into three major buckets. Experiences that I would like to accelerate, because the experiences are fine, but it takes too long. Think about like sitting on a phone waiting for a customer support person. Like, that's an
Right.
experience I would like
Right.
to accelerate. Any of the automations, writing, copy and this and that and stuff. Then there are experiences that we say, oh my God, this experience absolutely sucks. I wish I could replace it. All right, that's the second.
Hmm.
And then the third category is like, hey, I wish I could create a brand new experience for it.
Hmm.
So accelerate, replace, and create. And that should be the first conversation companies should have. And then see if AI can help you accelerate, replace, or create. And in some cases, it would. And in some cases, there are much better other technologies to help you accomplish that. So I'll stop there. And this is like, it's chaotic out there. People, it's a rat race, or whatever other better term there is. People are just dumping money into it without really considering the ROI, and doesn't bode well for the tech itself.
I think you're very right. I mean, a rat race, I would use the word confusion. There's mass confusion out there. And I like your idea of the arc as a sort of a foundation to build an AI strategy. I'm wondering actually at this point if the idea of an AI strategy for the enterprise is sort of a myth,
Mhm.
not because the managers don't care, is that I don't think they fully understand it. And in fairness to them, it's so new and it's changing so quickly. How can they fully understand it? Because it's capable of something like this in June, and by December, it's capable of something else altogether. So I'm going to build a strategy for this thing that changes every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
I want to use arc. I like that idea, but it's like, okay, it's going to accelerate. Well, accelerate versus replace versus create. It gets kind of blurry. It seems like it's a very hard thing to make a strategy for it because it changes so fast.
It is absolutely. And James, now think about it this way. If the strategy, and you're rightly saying so, that the strategy around the arc will move really fast. Now imagine instead building a strategy on the tech itself,
Upon the what? I'm sorry.
around the tech itself or the
The tech
technology,
itself. Okay, the
right?
technology itself. Okay, yeah.
Like I've heard people kind of like talk about like, oh, I'm gonna build all of my AI on such and such large language model. And I always laugh with them is that by the time you said that sentence, there are three new ones that popped up. And then there are all these architectural, like people get wrapped up into this conversation around like, oh, am I gonna build my own language model? Am I going to fine tune it? I'm going to use RAG architectures. Am I
Right.
going to use, complex AI, composable AI? Like there's 18,000 things that are moving so fast. So what I talk to companies about is that, look, what experiences do you have and you want to deliver? That is a lot more manageable problem set than trying to go after the latest technology in this field. So look, the reality is this is moving much faster than what we are used to, and there's no escaping that. We can't bring it down to the speed that we're used to, but
Right.
it's a lot easier to lock onto and build a strategy that we actually understand a lot better than the tech itself. And that's really the whole angle around that. Look, AI is really there to accomplish something, so that let's build that strategy on that something rather than AI itself, right?
Okay, so you're saying don't think exactly about everything that AI can do. Take a specific task that you want to improve and then apply AI to that. It's a very practical
100%.
approach.
So, so a lot of companies, they say like, okay, we are going to use AI. So let's think about where all the different places that we can apply AI. Now, I am very categorically saying that's the wrong approach. And most of the companies that take that, they will end up spending a lot of money, creating a lot of different silos and creating all sorts of chaos inside their company. That's just a bad place to start with. Now imagine that you come in and you say like, hey, what are my biggest problems? What do I want to solve? Like, oh, as an example, I have customer support people. I don't have enough people, so the call time is too long for responding. Or you come in and you say like, look, I do global business in like 72 countries. I don't have enough marketing people that can translate every document in every language. And the list goes on and on and on and on.
Sure.
Now, you didn't start with AI. You started with the problems that you have. And then you go and say, like, oh, is there an AI tool that can help translate? Well, all of a sudden you'll find like six tools and you can choose one of them. Is there one that can triage, calls before they come in? So now what you're doing is you have specific problems, use cases, experiences. I like to call them experiences. And then you go looking for an answer for them. And in that, it's a lot more manageable problem than trying to go and say, here, I have AI in my hand, where every place that I'm going to apply it. Uh,
Right. I mean, I like the practicality of that approach. It sort of kills the magic of it because you talked about magic earlier, and I like the idea that we can just bring AI in, sprinkle it over the software, and it kind of makes everything work faster, maybe boil an egg at the same time.
yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
killing the magic, Nabil. I mean, what
I
about
know,
that?
but James, as they say, even the best wizards in the world, they started by learning how to hold the wand. I don't know if anybody says that, but you get my you
I
get my
like that.
point. You get my drift on that, right? It's just it there's a lot of froth in the market when it comes to AI, and a lot of it will settle down. And at the end of it, unfortunately, there'll be a lot of companies who would be like, wow, we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars in it, and what did we get out of it?
Right.
Uh, and my aim as I go talk to our partners, our customers, and just industry as a whole is to help them get to a point where when they look back in the last 18 months, they say like, yeah, we only applied it for two use cases, but this is the value that we got out of it. And while doing that, we also learned all the things that not to do, right?
Right.
And now we can go and take that cultural, movement that I've created and then replicate it in different portions of my company. It is pragmatic, perhaps not as sexy as everybody wants, but trust me, in the end, we are responsible or answerable to our shareholders one way or another. and to our people and our users. And I think it's important that we take a pragmatic approach in this.
Good. All right. So I think you may have answered this question, but I like this question so much that I want to bring it up just to get your answer. So if AI does not have our trust, what can managers do to earn this trust? And I think part of the answer there is to use it in a strategic, practical way. But is there another answer?
And it's so I have two kids. One is 4-year-old and one is 7-year-old. And you'll be like,
Hmm.
why am I going on that tangent? Because in the end, trust is about humans. So we should think about how do we learn to trust when we were kids?
Hmm.
I'm teaching them how to ride a bike, right?
Hmm.
And then, so think about it this way. So my young one, who's 4-year-old, he wants me to hold onto the bike and run next to him
Yep.
because he trusts that he will not fall.
Sure.
Now we do it 3, 4, 5 times, and then slowly I start letting the bike go a little bit early. I think we all learned that way.
Yep.
We learn trust by repetition by repetition, right? So more and more we do it, after a little while, we trust that it will happen. So the best way to learn trust or gain trust or develop trust around a technology inside as an organization is to give people time to deal with that multiple different times from a smaller thing to a larger thing. And
Hmm.
that's how we learn trust as humans. And trust around AI is not going to go any other way, because this is not a problem or a question about AI. This is
Hmm.
a concern and a thing that we have to do around humans. And while AI is magical, we are the same good old humans, right? So what
Right.
I believe is that managers must absolutely remember, it is about the humans in the end. It is not about the AI. It is about the humans. So optimize it for humans. How do they trust things? How do they experience things? How do they get used to things, right? And like the same thing, I'll give you an example coming back
Mhm.
to the trust part. Every
Sure.
time I speak, one of the questions that everybody asks me is like, oh, will AI take my job? Or
Right. Well,
somebody,
that's a big one. Sure.
that's a big one. And I always tell them that 50 years, 100 years from now, I don't know. Maybe. But 50 years are 50 years away. But I
Right.
can tell you one thing right now. It will not be AI that will take your job tomorrow. It will be somebody using AI that will take your job tomorrow,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's really the key. How do you build and how do you apply AI to use cases where we can make our people more productive, more useful, give them a little bit more time, mental space to think about it?
Hmm.
People think that as businesses, it's all about the bottom line. I do agree it is all about the bottom line. And the only way to improve the bottom line is to really focus on our humans rather than
Hmm.
just on the
Hmm.
AI, right?
All makes perfect sense for sure. All right. So if you look to the future of AI in the enterprise, and we don't need to look 50 years out, but a few years out, it amazes me. It seems like the adoption rate is already remarkably fast. Certainly on a personal level, I look around me, I see friends and family using AI in many different ways, surprisingly. What do you see looking ahead? The future of AI in the enterprise and perhaps in our lives as well?
Yeah, and look, I'm going to bring it back to the ARC framework, and it's not just the way we describe it. This is also how we are deciding our investments,
Hmm.
on AI, and not in the last 3 years, but in the last like 12 years. Because as you mentioned, AI and enterprise has been around for a little while, and we were one of the pioneers in that space.
Yes.
Where we are today, most of the use cases that I see out there are all really about accelerating something that we already know how to do.
Right.
And like, okay, I know how to write an essay, but I can ask the AI to write it better for me, right? It's really an automation use case, right? So it's like, okay, I know how to do it. I can accelerate that through AI, and AI can accelerate it way better than
Hmm.
perhaps the previous set of technologies that were out there. I think that that's the phase that we are in. We will slowly move, in my opinion, in another 2 years, we will really start moving into the replace,
Mm.
where it would be like, okay, and this is where most of the alarmism comes in, that, oh, maybe, and even some big reports that are out there, like, who was I reading the other day? I don't want to quote somebody wrong, but it
Sure.
went somebody like that in the next 3 years, it will have a significant impact on 600 million jobs globally.
Yeah, I believe it. Yes.
Right. So will it? Yeah, most probably. And that's really the second phase in which we'll go. And in that replace phase, we have to figure out whether those jobs need to be there or not, or define in the way in which we define them today. We have to think about what is the relationship between a human, employee and an AI employee working
Mm-hmm.
together. Like
Mm-hmm.
AI is a co-worker concept that is
Right.
out there. AI is an agent worker, that is out there. But that's something that I believe in an enterprise world is mainstream. It's like about 2 to 2.5 years out. We are
Mm-hmm.
squarely in the accelerate phase. And I believe that companies that do this accelerate phase really well, using the ARC framework, focusing on the humans, they will be very well positioned for the replace phase. Companies that do it haphazardly, it's going to be a shock to the system. So that's how I view that we will have a lot of they made it and a lot more of they couldn't figure it out and they are either not in business anymore or
Right.
whatever the case might be. So I do believe that that's where we are headed in the enterprise side. There is no company that can avoid it, but just following it based on the latest tech news out there, that's not the way either. So this will
Mm-hmm.
force companies to really go back to the basics and understand what is the outcome that they're trying to deliver, and then apply AI in a very deliberate fashion. I know, probably a message that's contrary to what everybody wants to hear.
Right. Well, I think there's also between the ARC, there could be a certain blurring of functions. If you're going to accelerate something or create, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who was working on an architectural project thing. He just used the AI software to kind of create this frame for his house. And there it was. It was really done. It was actually really well done. And of course, he could have hired an architect. And so he accelerated it, you could say. But
Yeah.
in a sense, he actually created it. So it's like the difference between what's accelerate and what's create gets really blurry as much
It
as I
does.
want it to be clear.
No, it absolutely does. And that's where every company has to run it for themselves. Because, if I sit here and say, these are experiences I want to accelerate, and these are the ones that I want to create, there's
Hmm.
no universal truth or universal definition about it.
Right.
Assign whatever, letter you want to assign to it, but you must assign a letter like A, R, or C, because that will allow you to categorize. Because in the end, no matter who you are as an enterprise, especially, and no matter how big you are, you simply do not have enough resources to go and start doing everything, right
Right.
away.
Right.
So that's where, so however you categorize, there's a lot of leeway in how you categorize it. But the key goal there is to force you to categorize your use cases or experiences up front and then go apply AI to it. I will also add one more thing because, um, a lot of the people out in the industry then fall into the second issue in there. First is not categorizing, not deliberately selecting, and then just going, peanut buttering it. The
Hmm.
second one is that they say, like, oh, let us start with a use case that is the lowest risk, low hanging fruit.
Yes, there's a lot of that, sure.
One of the things that I would, through you, if I can advise to everybody, please do not pick the low hanging fruit with AI.
Really? Okay. Tell me why. I'm curious. Why not?
So, because this is how it goes. It goes like you're like, oh, I'm going to use AI. You put like, oh, this is a use case which is low risk and it's easy to do and everything. But what you forget is that low risk, easy to do things are also low value as well,
Hmm.
right? So then what happens is that you're still going to spend millions of dollars doing it, and then you turn around and say like, aha, look, I did this use case, and you look around and nobody gives
Right.
apologize for my language
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
really cares because this was not a high value use case. And then you say like, okay, now I need the extra next million to do the next thing. And everybody looks at it and is like, well, sorry, there's no ROI for that.
Right.
So pick the use case that people care about.
Hmm.
Pick
Hmm.
one, but pick the one that people care about. So when you are able to either accelerate it or replace it or create it, and then you are successful, people will be like, wow, this is amazing. And then you can show the return on investment, you can show the value and stuff.
Hmm.
A lot of managers out there are going by the same way as we used to in previous technologies. Let's just use it in a place where there's little risk.
Hmm.
AI has to be done completely opposite. It's counterintuitive, it scares the hell out of everybody, but that's the nature of AI, right?
Hmm.
Pick
That is
one
that
or
is
two
a
use cases that matter, right?
That is an interesting thought and a provocative thought. And Nabil, I think we talk about this another hour. I feel like we better say goodbye just to get back to our days. But wow, I would love to talk to you again sometime. A
Yeah.
lot of fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for coming on today.
James, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for having me here.